welcome to the Executive Protection Lifestyle Podcast, Season 2.
With your host, Byron Rodgers. This podcast is dedicated to the executive protection practitioner, the private security professional. In this podcast, we're going to talk about the mental, emotional, psychological, physiological fitness that goes into being an efficient and effective executive protection agent. Whether you're in law enforcement, whether you're a mom that's looking at how to protect her children, or a father that's focused on how to protect his family, I believe this podcast has something for all of you. We might even get into some tales from the crypts of true Hollywood stories from time to time. I'm doing this podcast because I feel the reality of this job is simple. If you really want to be good at executive protection, it's more than just a job. It really is a lifestyle. And those of you who've been in the game for any serious amount of time, you already know what I'm saying is true. So if that sounds interesting to you, enjoy the show. Out.
Boom! Yo, what's up, you guys? Byron Rodgers here for another awesome episode of the Executive Protection Lifestyle Podcast. I got something special for you. I'm here with Pablo Ortiz-Monasterio from Mexico, and we're going to talk about some heavy stuff. How you doing, Pablo?
Doing great, Byron. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's an honor, man. I mean, it's kind of outside of the realm of executive protection, kind of, you know, like the typical things that we talk about, but it's something that is also within the scope of things I think we need to understand, and it's really interesting. So, you know, we're going to talk about what's going on down in your neck of the woods with regards to kidnapping and human trafficking and all that stuff today.
And actually, that's why executive protection got so big down here. It was because of kidnapping.
Wow. So that industry is what spawned a lot of what we see going on down there. Because executive protection now, I know you guys are, you know, doing some things, and there might be some good school. There's some good schools popping up down there pretty soon, from what I hear, and
yes,
and stuff like that, which I can't wait. I'm so excited for, you know. But yeah, you guys are having kind of a boom of protection down there.
Yeah, well, it started a few years ago, but I think there's about 1,000 executive protection companies registered with the government. So you can imagine there's a lot of protection going on.
Wow. And I've heard that there's something to, like, maybe it's not the best idea to just hire a company down there. You really need to know how to know if they're legit. Is that true?
Yes, there's been a lot of concern, and there's been a lot of cases about kidnappings that were orchestrated by bogus security companies that just popped up. You know, they start doing business. Usually they show very credible credentials. They get into your home, they analyze your routines, they get to know you, and then boom, they extract somebody and they keep them for ransom.
Wow. Okay, so the inside job thing's a big thing. You got to know who you're working with.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know, because like I've worked in a lot of different compartments of the industry, but working south of the border, man, I feel like it's real. Like you got to it's real. You know, it's not any kind of detail for, like, you know, you're not trying to deal with little girls that want to, like, you know, grab your client, or, you know, you're not fighting people off of autographs. It's a different world, maybe.
Yes. Well, it's the thing is the consequences of mistakes down here are usually pretty expensive, right? And crime it's booming, and every day they're innovating, and they're getting better at what they do, and they're changing their techniques so that they try to stay ahead of what security companies do. So very few security companies are actually keeping up with that shift. And of course, there's a lot of very good security companies that actually have forced the bad guys to shift their techniques and their ways in order to find new markets and new victims, because they're really good at what they do. But they've learned the hard way. It got worse. It got bad very fast back in the 90s, and it got worse up until like 2010. And from 2010 till now, executive protection has been very successful, but then crime has migrated into another area now, and they're doing different things to kind of, you know, keep the money coming in.
Wow. Like what kind of different things?
It's interesting because it used to be kidnapping is still a very big business in Mexico. I can tell you that there's drugs, there's human trafficking, and right behind it, it's counterfeiting and kidnapping, which is one of the main sources of income for organized crime here.
Wow.
And what happened was they usually targeted very high-profile individuals that could pay a lot of money, but those high-profile, this started in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. The guerrilla in Mexico started growing, and they started out with the kidnappings. After that, a lot of smaller groups started emerging that did kidnapping for money. And what they usually did is they would usually look for somebody that could pay an average of $100,000 within 21 days. And they started taking those kind of people. But then, people that had money because of really, really high profile kidnappings that took place back in between 96 and 98. These new security companies started emerging. We started reaching out to different executive protection schools, kind of like, the American Executive Protection School that comes mostly from Secret Service. We had the Israeli Executive Protection School, which was also very famous at the moment, and the British Executive Protection School. And these companies started reaching out, trying to get help or trying to get, trained in order to protect their principals. And over time, they started realizing that our situation was different, that what was going on in the United States is mostly famous people protection and here most of the guys that you need to protect are anonymous. So it's not anyone in the street that's approaching them. It's someone that knows them and someone that wants something from them that's approaching them. And we started migrating, and then we created kind of like our own methods of doing things because we started seeing what failed along those years, and it worked. I actually spoke about this at the GSX 2 years ago in Las Vegas with the SIS, and we accomplished, or well, not we. I was still very young, but what they accomplished was they inoculated a part of the population in Mexico, the very high income part of the population, got inoculated against these type of kidnappings. Right then, a series of unfortunate events happened. They declare war on drugs. The army starts coming out into the streets. To cut the long story short. Yeah, go ahead.
When you say inoculated, you mean they were insulated and protected from it, or
Yes.
they started having like funds for? Okay, so they created systems that actually worked.
Yes, it thankfully 90 or more % of kidnappings that go on in Mexico are for economic reasons. They want money. It's mostly money, right? So what happens is this particular part of the population became bad business for the gangs that used to do kidnappings. So the very high profile individuals that used to pay millions of dollars and they were kidnapping for very long periods of time, they stopped being kidnapped for a while, and then they moved a little bit down market. But then when they increased the war on drugs and the army came into the streets and started fighting organized crime needed a new source of income. And this is our perception. There's we haven't really talked to El Chapo or anything that actually can confirm this, but there's a trend.
Charts, but
Exactly.
street content, street information.
Exactly, street information. But there's a pattern there that you can see by the time the army went into the street and kidnapping started increasing around 2008. What happened was organized crime got into kidnapping, and organized crime is a lot more effective than regular kidnapping gangs that operate locally. Organized crime goes into massive kidnappings. And what happens is they steered away from the high-profile individuals that were already taking care of themselves, because that involved a lot more risk and that involved a lot more logistics to be able to kidnap them, if you will. And they moved down market even more to people that would pay between $1,000 to $8,000-9,000 within a week. Shorter periods of time, a lot less money, and these are people that cannot afford to pay for executive protection.
Yeah, it's a great market.
It's a great market for them, and then
a whole bunch of them.
And they don't care if you drive a cab, if you own a little convenience store. They'll take them, and they'll have 60 to 100 people kidnapped in one particular place. They usually have them, up in the mountains where they're hard to reach. They collect whatever they can within a week, and boom, they're back. And it's kind of like they're swapping people all the time.
Wow.
So it's getting hard to protect people from that.
Because you kind of, so once you reach that demographic, like maybe you're a small business owner or something, you have to recognize the fact that you could be a target.
Yes. And you have to recognize the fact that if you cannot afford to pay for security, you need to learn to do security on your own. Do your own security, right? It's kind of like self-protection.
Yeah, this is amazing. So how has the security industry responded to that? Is there anything you can do for that business owner? Is it just kind of educating them, or because the money is what drives us, you know?
Yeah, of course. But even security companies that are, people that do security in Mexico are paid considerably less than what they would be paid anywhere else in the world. And there are a lot of them. We have a lot of people that do security here. I can tell you there's about 100,000 security guards in Mexico registered. Wow. And but still, it's impossible to take care of everyone because they cannot afford to have security. So what we need to do is we need to teach them about security, what they need to do to stay safe, and kind of like create this same inoculation that we created for the upper end of the socioeconomic
spectrum of people.
Spectrum, exactly. We need to create the same thing for the lower end, with them becoming the worst possible business as time continues. Right? It's hard. It's not executive protection. It's actually self-protection, and they need to learn, and they need to do it because the government's not doing it, and they won't do it because it's too hard for them, and it doesn't pay. Yeah.
Wow. Are there any like small tips you could just drop on us real quick, like little things that you kind of like, hey,
for self-protection?
Yeah, just for the business owner, the small business owner, the small guy.
Well, the small guy, there's a few things that you need to take care of. Is one, you need to be very careful with whom you hire and who you let into your life, because of all the information that they're going to get. Right? Be careful to separate the information from your job or from your company and personal information. Don't mix, because a lot of times it's really easy, and we do it because it's right there. We have somebody at the office and we send them home to do a couple of chores, and then they come back because it's easier. But that kind of information, you don't know where it's sending out. And the other thing is pay attention. Right? Pay attention if you see patterns, people following you, things like that. It's not as simple as we can do in a couple of minutes here, but it's usually about if they see you, you can see them. The problem is you're not paying attention, and they're taking advantage of that. So if you see somebody that's continuously roaming outside your house, they're studying you, they're looking at you, they're looking at your children, don't dismiss it as normal. Do something, right? Like what ASAS says, that if you see something, do something.
Yeah, see something, say something, man.
Exactly. See something.
It's back to, we find ourselves back to the hostile planning cycle and trying to interrupt the hostile planning cycle, which is, you talk about this with regards to terrorism, and when they're trying to, plan an attack, they have to expose themselves at various points amongst that planning cycle.
Yes.
And we aim to disrupt that planning cycle. And so
I am a big fan, and I study a lot about Colonel John Boyd. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Not really.
Colonel John Boyd was colonel from the Air Force. He died in 1997. He created the concept for the OODA Loop.
Yeah. Nah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm Marine, man. We had to hear OODA Loop so many times.
It's very interesting. That man was a genius.
Yeah, it's great.
It is, and it's practically what you're saying. What he said is you have to get into your enemy's OODA loop, into his planning, disrupt his decision making, so that he makes a mistake. Right?
Yeah,
it's very interesting. We have digested the idea of the OODA loop, kind of like to teach these people how to use that OODA loop in their day-to-day lives. But we don't tell them about the OODA loop, because then they think it's simple. It's as simple as observing, orienting, deciding, and acting, and it's not. Right? So we have to stay away from that. We don't tell them about that, but we tell them the sequence that they have to follow in order to know when somebody's studying them for kidnapping.
Wow, This is good stuff, Pablo. I dig it, man. That's awesome. That's good to go. It's a lot of what I try to do with the Protect Your Nation brand, man. Make good people a little more dangerous, help them be willing, capable, and prepared, So so now that we've gone all those different places, we bring it into, so would you mind just breaking down your background for us real quick? So everyone knows, where you come from, why they're listening to you.
Of course. Well, I started out in security in year 2000. I was invited to be part of a group that did kidnap and ransom negotiations. Between 2000 and 2004, we did about 334 cases. And then 2004 decided to step out and started doing security, different areas of security. And but the interesting thing about this part of my background is we saw so many cases and we learned why.
Yeah, how many cases did you say?
334 back then. And then I saw other ones. But
wow.
And that's within 4 years.
Man, that's learning how to drink out of a fire hose, man. That's I mean, you understand the game, that's
what we tried to do. Exactly. That's what we tried to do. Because one thing you have to understand, a negotiator is not what you see on TV. It's not someone that grabs the phone and talks to these people.
Yeah.
Because if you look at it, and you do security, you always have to look at it from the bad guy's point of view.
All the time.
If you were the bad guy and you had somebody kidnapped, would you be willing to talk to somebody that's not part of the family?
No.
Of course not. And if you find
what
out,
power does he have? And he's going to be trained on how to do it. Like, I want to talk to the weak people that I'm preying on.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And you need to create anguish. If you cannot get to the people that's going to get anguished by the things that you're telling them, it's not going to work. Right. So they need to talk to somebody in the family, and the risk of them finding out that you try to trick them would eventually result in harming the victim, right? The kidnappee. So we have to be very careful. So it's not like in the movies. It's like we're like attorneys. We sit in the back and we listen to the conversations. We write on the walls. We tell them the arguments that they need to say. And the main goals of a negotiator is first to make sure that the times are reduced, that the quantities that they pay are reduced, and that the stress levels are reduced. We do not guarantee that the victim is going to come back because that's not our job. The victim will come back. And I'm getting ahead of myself because I know all those questions that you have prepared, but if in most, just to go get a little bit ahead, in most cases you will pay and he will come back. It's very little. Yeah, it's a small percentage that actually gets killed, and I'll get more into that when we get to that question if you want. But our job is exactly. Our job is to, because we know from experience how it usually goes down. We're going to make it easier for the family to understand what's going on and what to expect next, and how not to to act that would extend captivity or actually break the family.
Wow. That's so you ruined every hostage negotiator movie I've ever seen just now.
Well, there's one that is actually based on a true event. Remember that movie with
Say Man on Fire. Say Man on Fire, please. Man
on Fire. It's a great movie. It was filmed in Mexico.
Yeah.
They hired professional negotiators to advise them on how it usually goes down. But you have to understand it's Hollywood. Their job is to entertain you, not to inform you. Right. So Man on Fire, everything is going perfect up until the moment when she gets kidnapped. Then it's a movie. Then
it goes all over
everywhere. Yeah. There's one that was actually based, and I don't know if they had access to this information or not, but it was called Ransom, actually. And this little kid that gets kidnapped, his dad goes on TV and says, "See all this money that you're asking for a ransom, instead of giving it to you, I'm gonna offer it to whoever brings me your head."
Yeah, man. Is this
I forgot that. I'm very bad with names.
Not man, my man from
Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson. Yes.
Well,
I'm watching it tonight.
That particular case it actually happened, and unfortunately, it was the brother of a friend of mine. It was
Really?
one of the, yes, it was a kidnapping. It was very famous. It was done by a guy called Daniel Arismendi, who was one of the most most successful kidnappers we ever saw in Mexico. He was nicknamed the ear chopper because his signature card was sending the ear of the victim to the father or to the family as proof of life. And he did a lot of kidnappings. This was one of the first ones that he did. And the father of this boy, and this was late 90s, the father of this boy, when he was getting into the conversation, Arismendi was also always very calm. He was never aggressive. He never insulted the family. And in his crazy mind, he said, well, they're going through enough because I have their family member and I don't want to insult them or anything. So,
he's respectful. Oh, man. Good Lord.
And he came to a point where he said, well, I want this much amount of money. I don't remember the amounts. And the father said, well, we cannot, get that amount of money. He said, well, I know you can. Back in those days, they used to have a lot of information about how much money the family had. And he said, well, this is the amount of money that I'm willing to negotiate for. So the father gets nervous, gets angry, and he says, well, if you do something to my little kid, I'm going to use this money to hunt you down. I'm going to offer it as a ransom for your head. The problem is in that movie, which is the exact same situation, the kidnapper gets nervous and makes a lot of mistakes. In this movie, the kidnapper hung out the phone, went to the kid's room where he had him captive, got him into the shower, and put a bullet in his head. And that was it.
In real life?
Yes, sir.
Wow.
And he just left him there for the blood to go down the drain and then disappear. And that was the beginning of the end, because this kid's mother founded, she created a foundation or association called, it's called México Unido contra la Delincuencia, which is Mexico United Against Crime. And it's one of the largest associations that actually fought this kind of crimes and would eventually lead to his demise and ending up in prison. But he did go into the shower. He took the kid into the shower and put a bullet in his head.
Wow.
That quick, that cold.
Wow.
And from there we learned never to do that, right?
Yeah, the ego, like you don't want to offend, while you have cards on the table, that you don't want to lose. Pieces on the table you don't want to lose.
So as I said, we took all this time, all these years, and all these many cases to learn what happened, why did it happen, and what could have been done to prevent it. We talked to all the victims when they came back. So it was interesting, and that's where my career started. And from there, I moved on into training mostly.
Wow. Okay. Outstanding. What sticks out? You said from there, you use this information to put together, what was it again?
We do only training. We decided to go into training. We created an executive, and it's kind of like a branch of executive protection. We do security driver training. Say
that again. You broke up. Security.
Oh, sorry. We do security driver training.
Yes.
Right. So, and we took advantage of everything we saw. And there's another thing that I saw through those years. It was that a lot of people were being tricked into training in things that really made no sense. And as I said, I've been studying. I'm a scholar. My technical background comes from actually studying all these things. I love physics. I love engineering. I love studying John Boyd, Colonel John Boyd. I've studied we actually had Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman speaking at one of our events in Mexico. I've studied a lot along him or about him. And not everyone gets to be in the, where the action happens. Right. But my job is to make sure that when the action happens, your skills or the skills of the people that are going to be in that front line are actually real. Because a lot of people are being tricked into training in things that seem very glamorous, like combat training, or and they're teaching them to jump out of helicopters when they never travel on a helicopter. They don't even have the gear to jump out of a helicopter. So it makes no sense, but it's fun and it looks nice, right? So we went into this business to try to to counter that in Mexico and try to educate people on how training works, how the physical part or the psychophysiological part of training works, to create the right skills so that you can trust that the skills are going to be there when that thing happens. Because in Mexico, it's not a matter of if it ever happens, it's a matter of when it happens.
Yeah.
Will you be able to do something, and how do you measure that and all that? So we got into this business from the science part of it more than the tactical part of it. We create the science so that the tactical people can actually do their jobs.
Awesome. From experience,
based on real life situations.
Yeah, not as much theory. I dig that. I really dig that, especially now in this world of because I see all these influencers. I just see people online, and it's like, yo, is this guy legit? Has he done this before? Does he have a background, or is he just really good at marketing and he looks sexy on Instagram? So you guys are following him and acting like he's like the business when he's not a real anything.
Exactly. That's the problem. And action looks sexy.
Yeah.
It's like Hollywood. And you actually brought up a very good example of the way I see how security goes down in Mexico. It's Men on Fire. Men on Fire it's a great movie, and I actually use it in my training.
I love it.
Yeah, I love it too. But there's this scene where the little girl, Dakota Fanning, is at this piano audition, remember? And Denzel Washington, her bodyguard, is standing right outside. And when she comes out, Denzel Washington is exchanging fires with the bad guys.
Yeah.
And the Come Niños, they were called. And they used a lot of real terms. But he yells, "You run!" and she starts running down the sidewalk, and he gets hit. And then she comes back because she loves her bodyguard. And when she tries to help him, then she gets kidnapped.
Take her, yeah.
If we look at it from the real side of security, when this little girl opens the door and sees her bodyguard exchanging fire with the bad guys, if she would have taken a step back and closed that door, it would have been Hollywood's most boring movie ever.
Yeah, and then the girl locked the door, and the bodyguard got shot.
That's it.
And then the kidnappers left.
And then you get credits, right? Because there's no kidnapping.
Yeah.
So when you do that in marketing, it doesn't work because people want to see the part of the movie when you get into fighting and into all of these things. So what we do is we work in the background. We work with real professionals that actually know that, when that time comes, they're going to need those skills to be, they're going to be there. And they need to trust that the skills that they got in their training, because you have limited amount of training. So if you waste that limited amount of training in jumping out of helicopters, when the moment comes for, when things get real, you won't be able to use that in any way, right? So you need to trust that the skills that you're getting are going to be there for the moment when you need.
Yeah, are really high quality and coming from a place of knowledge and experience, not theory. God bless.
Exactly.
Everyone's got a plan to get punched in the face, right?
Mike Tyson.
Yes. So if you're going to explain a kidnapping from start to finish, how does it usually go down? What are some common ways it goes down?
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit.
Okay, so
if I...
Yeah, I was going to say, if you were going to explain what you saw in terms of how these kidnappings go down, are there common themes? Like, how does it go down from start to finish?
I'm going to talk about, kidnap for ransom, and when they kidnap high-profile executives, which is what really, concerns us in executive direction. Relevant. There's a few things that you need to take into account. There's two types of professional kidnappings. There's a professional long-term and a professional short-term. Professional long-term, they're going to go against individuals that cannot hide their wealth, right? People that are always on the media, that that they're billionaires. Whatever they do, they can't hide their wealth. And they're going to ask for millions of dollars, and they're going to collect millions of dollars. They're going to keep them for a long time, and negotiations are very difficult. Okay. Negotiations are usually not one-on-one, usually done over mail or, anonymous emails, or they find ways to do it so that you cannot negotiate. And then there's the professional short-term. The professional short-term, they're going to go against individuals that not necessarily are very wealthy, but they have enough money to pay for a good ransom. And this good ransom, what 10, I mean is, about $100,000.
Oh, okay.
100,000. The other guys are going to go for millions. These are going to go for 100,000, 100 to 500,000, and they're going to keep them for about a month. And right. So the first thing that these individuals need to know is that they actually have the money. They need to have that information, and this usually comes from within. You know, from your inner circle, somebody talks or somebody sells your information somewhere, and then they decide they're going to go after you. It's not because it's really hard to just be, you know, scanning the social media to see who appears to have money and then try to do all this investigation. The investigations, as you know, they're not cheap, they're not easy. So they usually get this information from somewhere. And they have huge networks looking for this kind of information. And this kind of information is, well, the guy owns a Ferrari, or he has this in this house somewhere. And then they get your attention, and then they start doing research on who you are to make sure that you're good business for them. As I said, this is business. This is money.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, they go into your social media. The more information they can find on social media, that's gold mine, right?
Yeah.
They're going to try to go to people that are close to the family, domestic employees like the maids, drivers, gardeners, things like that. People that do cleaning. If they can, they're going to try to go through the office to try to find information that would actually corroborate that this person has enough money to pay for it. They're not going to take the risk if it's not worth.
Okay.
So the investigation, exactly. So there's an investigation beforehand, and so that they can choose who to kidnap. Once they have you, they have to study when to kidnap you. Right? It's not like they're not going to go into your home and bring you out, because they need to have everything controlled in the way they do things. Right? So they're usually going to look for routines. Gavin the Becker has that, down to the with his books, how they do it, down to the T, exactly, and how they do it, and that doesn't change at all. They're going to look for soft spots. They're going to look for patterns. They're going to look for choke points. They're going to look how to break your security, or how to where you're making mistakes usually, and people do it. Usually, they have very tough security around them, and then they're going to go on Sundays. They go to the club to play tennis, and they don't take the driver, or they don't take the security because they kind of think it's not routine, and it is, right? And they're gonna wait for the weakest link, and once they find that, that's when they're going to attack. So that's like the normal preparation for that for the kidnapping. After it goes down, usually they're kept well. They usually, because also think about it from the bad guy's perspective. Having a person that is not comfortable, or that it's ill, or that it's aching, or that it's hurt, it's going to be a lot more difficult to keep for a month or 6 months or a year or whatever, than someone that's healthy and just behaving well. So usually violence, it's being kept to the exactly. It's being minimized for their own sake, for their own, because it's also a lot more difficult to negotiate. I'm going to tell you this anecdote later on about this guy that they tried to negotiate with him already dead, and it doesn't work, because there's a million ways to find out somebody's already dead, right? So usually they're going to try to keep them healthy and not comfortable. It's not a hotel, it's not a spa, but I mean, they're going to be okay. Who are they going to take? And this is very important. Sometimes companies in Mexico invest a lot of money in taking care of their executives, but they forget about their families. And it's very, very weird that they actually take the executive, because most companies, if not all, have policies against negotiating with kidnappers, or because also if you take somebody from a big company, from a big transnational company, Fortune 500, and you actually get a ransom, or you get paid by the company to get this executive back, immediately after that, every single executive in the company is going to have a bullet, a bullseye on them. Yeah. So it doesn't work, right? So they usually won't go for the person that signs the checks. They're going to look for somebody that represents the highest emotional value for that person. So usually your executive, he is vulnerable, but his family is a lot more vulnerable. Even if they wanted to do something to the company, taking somebody with a high emotional attachment to this person will be better than taking him in particular.
Yeah, right? More damaging psychologically, more.
Thanks.
anxiety driving.
Exactly.
You know,
exactly. And these guys, that's what they do. I mean, they're merchants of terror.
yeah.
And so usually, what they're going to take teenager boys. I don't know why, but we usually prefer teenager boys than teenager girls.
Really?
Yeah. And they very, very seldomly do they take kids. Kids are really hard to keep. And it's very, very, very weird to hear that somebody took a wife or a mother-in-law, for instance. In Mexico, it's kind of like the idiosyncrasy.
Well, no one cares about the mother-in-law. No one's going to pay for the mother-in-law to come back. No, joking.
Yeah. And when I get into trouble, that's why I keep my mouth shut.
Yeah, I know, right? But wow. So it's actually the targets are males usually.
Male, yeah, teenager males. They're harder. They're easier to keep. They just throw them in a room, feed them twice a day, and that's it. They don't need to take. They don't need much care about.
Wow.
Our experience has been when somebody's being kidnapped. Now, looking at it from the side of the victim, when you're there, you need to, stay calm. You need to keep your faith. Faith is very important. Faith that something's being done to get you out of there, regardless of what they tell you, because they're usually going to try to play tricks to get you to give more information. So they're going to tell you that either your father doesn't really care about you, or that they're not willing to pay, or that they're saying that they don't have the money to pay for you. So they try to do this to get more information so that they can have better cards when negotiating towards the outside, right? And so also as a victim, you need to keep the faith. You need to, you need to trust that everyth's being done on the outside to get you out. That the odds are in your favor, because most people get out.
Really?
Awesome. A lot of girls when they come to training, they're very 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 concerned that if they get kidnapped, they might get raped. I can tell you, of 334 cases, I only saw one case where the girl got raped.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. I would think. Wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah, because for them it's money, right?
Yeah.
Once again, and they need to keep an order, and this is organized crime in most cases. When it's not organized crime, it might change a lot. And now with all the cases that are going on in Mexico, it's really hard to keep track. But back then, or in the cases that are really professional kidnappings, only once did I see a girl get raped. And I think by what she told me and the stories that she told me, I think it was something that one guy within the group decided to do on his own. Is not something that was, that was allowed. It wasn't okay by the boss or by the big man.
Wow.
But well, it happened once. So as I said, it's you got to keep calm. You got to be very careful not to volunteer information. You have to be very careful not to lie, because that will increase the levels of violence, and you have to, try to keep it as steady as possible, or as calm as possible. And usually within 1 month, your family's going to pay, you're going to come out, and the psychological stress is hard, and you need to seek professional help. Very few people can actually get out of it, on their own.
Yeah. What happens if you don't pay or can't pay? Everyone pays. How does this work? You just pay. You just do.
Yes.
Man.
When security fails and you're already there, everyone pays. I've seen in my career, I've seen very, very few, like military or government operatives that went in and actually rescued the kidnappings. It happens, but it's very, very seldom. It's not something that happens all the time.
Really?
Yeah. Unfortunately. Wow. Because it's very dangerous, going in, if they have hostages, going in and preserving the life of these hostages, and also trying to escape and all that is not really a good idea, because you're gonna increase violence. I've only heard of one case where the kidnappee escaped, and he was successful at escaping.
Really?
But I think that's an exception to the rule.
Wow. Okay.
Right.
So essentially, like, stay calm. Trust that things are being worked on the outside. Keep your faith. Ground yourself psychologically, and play the game as respectfully and intelligently as you can.
Keep yourself entertained. If usually, in the stories that I've heard from people that were kidnapped, They usually ask for books, they ask for things, and they were given to them. If you asked, usually they give it to you. Unless it's one of those really express kidnappings that, it's going to last a week, then they don't care. You're there with 150 other people and you're going to be there for 6-7 days and they're going to throw you out. But if you're going to be there for the long run, they usually give them things. They give them books. I know of a guy that asked for a Bible and they got him a Bible. And then when that Bible was worn out, they exchanged for a new one.
Really?
Yeah. I've known of people that, if they have, illness and they need medicine, they ask for the medicine and they get the medicine. One of the victims that came back said that he asked for Johnny Walker Black Label and he got Johnny Walker Black Label.
Really?
As I said,
wow. Okay.
If it's going to be for the long run, they usually try to, to keep them calm and to keep them, and try to keep yourself entertained. I don't advise, on drinking because that's going to create anxiety, and anxiety is not a good thing. But I do advise, ask for whatever you need. If you're already there, try to keep calm, ask for whatever you need. If you need medicine, if you need to, to wash yourself, different food, if you're allergic to something, let them know.
So let's say you're working with a client in Mexico, they've been kidnapped. What should a security professional or family member do right after that takes place?
Okay. There's a time for everything, right?
Yes, sir.
We had a case, and I usually use this as an example in every course that we teach. This guy was driving his little daughter, 9-year-old, to school, 7 a.m. in the morning. He gets into an ambush. They take his little girl. So he gets out of the car and he says, please don't take her. I'll give you $1 million pesos, about $100,000 back then. I'll give you $1 million pesos in cash right now. What do you think happened?
They took her.
Of course. And that negotiation started at $1 million pesos.
Exactly.
At $100,000.
We want $200,000 now.
I mean, if you had $100,000 in cash, how much money can you get in 21 days? So that was a very difficult negotiation. Usually when they ask for money for right now, it's not a real kidnapping. It's either an extortion or a virtual kidnapping, which is fake kidnapping. Yeah. And or it's one of those kidnappings that's just going to last a couple of days and they really don't care about information. They just care about what you can get real quick and, give it to them and then move on. But on a real kidnapping or kidnapping ransom for ransom, they're going to ask for money right now because they want to know where they're standing and where they want to start or where they're going to start for asking money, right? So if you say, okay, I have $1 million now, they're going to say, okay, if you have $1 million now in a month, you're going to have 10 million. 20 million, right? So you have to be very careful with that kind of thing. The first thing is the person goes missing, you're going to get a call. When you get that call, the rules are...
okay, go ahead.
Right? They're going to tell you, we have this person kidnapped, and they're usually going to give you some proof that they have, right? And they're going to say, we want $10 million, something that's, outrageous and something that most people can't afford. So, and they know that. They know that because it's going to come down through the negotiation. So the first thing you need to do is you need to keep calm. You need to realize that it's not going to get solved in that particular call, in that first call. Do not commit yourself to anything. Do not commit yourself to any quantities of money because that is where the negotiation is going to start. You need to say, I need to figure out, I need to find out how much money I can offer you. And, buy yourself some time so that you can get into those negotiations. And then get yourself some help. As I said, the role of a negotiator is helping the family go through the kidnapping. The odds of that person coming back, alive and unharmed are really high, above 90% in all cases. Wow. So why do we want to get help? So that you understand what comes next. So that you can reduce your times, reduce quantities, and reduce stress.
Stress.
Exactly, right. Stress plays a major role in this because every time when they're about to reach the climax, they're gonna increase violence as much as they can because they need to establish trust and they need to know that you're not lying and they need to know that what you're offering is the most amount of money that you can actually offer, and they're not gonna get any more. Right. So that's when the business has come to its climax. This is the best deal for the most bang for the buck that they're going to get, right? So they're going to give the person back and get that money and move on. If they raise violence and you give them more money, they're going to know that you were bluffing, right? So that's where the negotiator can advise you on how to do things, how to read what's going on. And they tell you that, usually when they start getting into this climax or close to this climax, what they're going to tell you every time where you don't, complied with what they're telling you, they say, okay, you go tell your wife to make you another kid because you just killed this one. And they hang up the phone and they stop calling for 10 days or 5 days. And this is mental pressure that very few people, I don't wish this on my worst enemy.
Yeah. Wow, man.
And as a negotiator, exactly. And as a negotiator, you have to tell them,
you're like, this is just a slow Tuesday. Trust me.
Yes, you have to trust me. There's no winning anything for them if they kill him now, right?
Yeah.
They want to know, they want to break you and they want to make you go find some more money.
Yeah.
So if now you give them more money, even if sometimes, a brother appears out of nowhere and says, well, I have another million pesos or another $100,000 that I can loan you so that you can increase the bag. And we say, well, that's not a good idea because then they will know that you were lying.
Yeah.
That wasn't your top and that you have other means of getting money.
So maybe they need to push again and see if you can do that again.
And that will, if they cannot establish trust on your side, we can establish trust on our side. Establishing trust on their side is going to be very difficult because if they don't trust us, what's going to happen is they're going to collect that amount and then they're going to say, we don't trust you. And they're not going to give them back. They're going to start a brand new negotiation from zero. So you get to pay twice. So you need to make sure that trustworthiness is there from both sides before you make the exchange.
Wow. How does the handover itself end up going down usually?
Well, that's usually very simple because if the trust has been established, usually we call it we tie the wheels or the wheels. You make them swear over the Holy Dead and over the Virgin Mary and all that. They're very keen in and this is something that Ed Calderon can explain to you a lot better than I can. But they're very religious and very faithful to death. They pray to the Holy Death. So you make them swear by that, and you make them swear by the Holy Mary and their mothers and all that. And even the bad guys don't want to go to hell, right? So they usually commit. You hand out the money. It's usually done in non-personal exchange. You leave the money somewhere where they know it's not going to get stolen, and they're going to go later to pick it up. And this is like the most vulnerable part on their side, right?
Yeah,
and
they have to appear.
They have to appear at a precise location. And this is where cops in Mexico, police used to do their operatives. And, they did all this
operations,
operations and the display of force, and they went and got them. But what the kidnappers started doing is they started creating a cell, like the terrorist groups operate. There's one cell that's going to get the money, and there's another cell that has the kidnappee or the victim, and they don't know each other. And the guy who's managing the whole operation usually has a middleman between the guys who are collecting the money and the guys, and there's another middleman between the guys that are keeping him safe. So if you get the guys that are getting the money, what the head is going to do is going to kill the middleman, so that there's no link, because these guys really don't know anything.
Yeah.
So they stopped doing that because it started. You started losing the money because these guys would take it and then the person would not return. You had to start over, with them knowing that you betrayed them, and that's not something that you want as a family, right?
Yeah.
So, that wasn't a good idea. So usually what happens is you pay the money where they tell you. Usually you have a driver, they keep them driving around forever on a cell phone, a burner. And when they're sure that he's not being followed, then he drops the money, they pick it up and they leave. And within 24 hours, the victim is released. You get a phone call from somewhere in the middle of nowhere, that your family member is there and you have to go pick him up. Where it gets tricky is when they take little kids. And this is the reason why they don't take little kids very often. And it is, how do you release a kid in the middle of the forest, on a back road in the middle of nowhere? He's going to die. And that won't work. So you have to make sure that they actually leave them at a known location. So that's why they usually don't take little children. It proves to be very tricky for them, and it exposes them a lot more.
Wow.
Right? So it usually goes down like that. You just leave the money where they tell you, and the person's going to return.
Wow. Interesting. Corruption within law enforcement. Do you see that stuff?
Yes, actually, there was one of the major kidnapping bans in the year 2000, and it was dismantled in I think it was 2005. The headman was a Marine from a Mexican. He was actually nicknamed the Marine, and we don't have Marines, but that's how they call the Navy here.
Okay.
So he was a Navy man, and so yeah, we get a lot of corruption, a lot of people that get in touch with that. There's usually a lot of nexus with local police and all that, and they tell you that. They tell you we have nexus with everyone inside. So if you call the police, we're gonna kill them. Not necessarily true, but they usually do have a lot of people in their payroll to make this happen. And now, as organized crime has gotten into the business, it's gotten even worse because I've heard. I didn't negotiate that, or I wasn't present at that negotiation, but I've heard of a case that was kidnapped in Cabo, and he was released in Guadalajara, and he says that he was brought into a plane inside a box. So that's got to involve a lot of corruption.
Yeah. Wow. Right. Yeah. So when this happens, do you call the police, the local police, or do you just wait and try to you have to call some hostage negotiators? Is that a law enforcement thing, or is that a private side thing? Or
there are very good hostage negotiators in both sides, in the private sector and in the police. But you have to be careful who you talk to. There's an organization in Mexico. There's it's the Fiscal Antisecuestros, which would be like the attorney or the kidnap related crimes attorney in Mexico. And if you call him, they have a lot of really, really trustworthy people that are really good at what they do. And the information is very well taken care of. You don't call the local police. I wouldn't at all. And there was a problem also that I didn't mention earlier. And one of the reasons that I left that group was because you've heard of Genaro Garcia Luna, right? That he's locked up in New York without bail, and he used to be like the chief of police and chief of security here in Mexico. And he didn't like back in the day. He was very good at kidnap and ransom negotiations. He had a whole team inside the federal police that did kidnap and ransom negotiations, and he convinced the president back then to create a law that would create liability for negotiators if something went wrong in the case. In my case, I never saw anything go wrong. I never saw a fatality. Everyone came back. Of the 334 cases that I told you, everyone came back.
Wow.
But that raised liability, so we stepped out of the business. There's still very good private negotiators. There's still the insurance companies around the world, they usually have their local negotiators that they work with, and they have very good ones. And as I said, if you call the right person in the police, as long as it's not the local police, it's the federal police, it's a coin toss, but the odds are that you will get a good negotiator in return. These guys have a lot of experience as well.
Okay. So there's assets there, but calling the local police is like, don't waste your time generally. Don't, because they're probably involved with some, if not that particular group, they're going to be involved in some group. And that starts to get the word out. And we've seen cases where you get two people calling to negotiate and you don't know who to trust, right? There's two simultaneous negotiations, and that's because the information got out. Wow.
And you don't know who has them, right? So you have to be careful with that as well. And of course, they really don't like when you call the police. So if they find out that you call the police, they're going to raise violence. So you have to be careful to call the right person at this, kidnap-related crimes attorney.
And when you say raise violence, what does this mean exactly? Like, what kind of things do they do?
Well, your imagination is the limit. But they're usually going to hurt the victim to prove to you that they're telling the truth. They have to establish their trustworthiness, right? Yeah. And whatever they have to do to get to that point, and it could be mutilating the victim, sending you a finger or an ear, or actually beating him up on camera really bad, so that you actually so you actually acknowledge that they mean business and they're in charge. Wow. And you have to do that. So anything that goes wrong, anything you try to do, to sidetrack them, it's gonna increase the chances of your family member getting hurt.
Wow. So you got to play the game.
You have to. Yeah. They're in charge. You're playing in their web, in their plan, right?
Yeah.
So you have to work with what you have, and you have to make sure that you don't do anything that will encourage them or that will make them increase violence to prove to you that they mean what they're saying.
They mean business. What about you mentioned a dead hostage situation and it being difficult to negotiate if those. Yeah, how does that play out?
This same guy that I told you about, Arismendi, the air chopper, this was the last kidnap that he actually did, that he actually carried out. And what happened is he went for a very wealthy family in Querétaro, in Mexico. He went for this guy called Raúl Nieto. And I heard a story from one of his family members. He told it to me so that I could tell it to other people, and stop these kind of things from happening. Mm. And what happens is one day Raúl got a phone call from, Raúl called his brother and told him, what, I'm being followed and I'm about to be kidnapped, I'm sure. So please call the federal police. I'm driving a Porsche, and tell them to intercept me I'm getting on a freeway so that they can't, they can't follow. But this guy was very astute. He knew this was going to happen, so he started pushing him into that, and he had the ramp into the freeway blocked with a van. So what Raúl tried to do, he tried to ram the van with a Porsche. Porsches are not good for ramming, and he got pinned in between the van and the safety rail on the side. And when they tried to get him out of the Porsche, somebody lost a shot, and they shot him in the stomach, and they killed him. Right, so they took him. Still, bleeding out. They took him to captivity, to wherever they were hiding, and they buried him up to the neck and put ice bags on his head to try to keep him cool. They cut off the ear, still kept it in ice, sent it to the family. But when the ear came, there was a doubt whether or not he was alive because of the amount of blood that they saw in the Porsche and outside the car. And so they had that ear analyzed, and they told him that it was cut post-mortem, and that the kid was, well, he wasn't really a kid, but he was young, and that he was dead. So the family made the decision to actually carry out the negotiation in order to get Arismendi and throw him in jail. They managed to do that. He's serving now 46 perpetual, life sentences, and he's never coming out. But there was a clear example of how when it's too late, it's already too late. And you need to learn when you need to surrender. Mm. And he went past that, and he increased violence. He raised the bar again on violence. And well, it was terrible. But as I said, it's very difficult to, and of course, I'm sorry, I neglected to say, they tried to send another proof of life with him. They unburied him. They cleaned him up, they put him in the shower, the corpse. They used makeup on him, and they took a picture with a newspaper holding it like this. And it's bizarre because they actually tried to do all this.
Wow.
And I mean, nobody was buying it. They already knew that he was dead, and the only reason why they continued with the negotiation was to get him, and they got him, which was fantastic for Mexico, but. I'm sure if you talk to the father and the brother, they would say they would have rather paid a lot more money and would rather have these guys still walking around than have his family member alive, right?
Let's see here. Hardest lessons you've learned in the field.
Hardest lessons I learned in the field.
And it kind of dovetails with any mistakes you've made in the field as well.
I think that the hardest lessons I've made since I've started, working in this field is I've trusted the wrong people. And I lost a lot of time working with and trusting or following someone that said that he knew what he was doing and he didn't. Mm. I found that I lost a lot of years of my life figuring out which of those people, the people that appear all the time, like you said, the people that have great marketing and all that. I lost a lot of years figuring out who was real and who wasn't.
Yeah.
I think that was the
trust.
Yeah, I think that was the hardest part.
I've done the same thing. Because I don't really lie, so like, not that I don't lie, I'm a human, right? But like, I generally am pretty much telling the truth. And so I'm really vulnerable to people lying to my face. I've had to just accept this about myself, because I'll meet someone and they'll tell me a whole bunch of crazy stuff. And I'm like, man, that's awesome. And I'll be like telling my wife or like telling my buddies, and they're like, you believe this? Like, you really think he's telling you the truth? I'm like, of course he's telling me the truth. And then, and I'm like, well, how are you going to just sit here and lie about this? He's got, machine guns and up armored vehicles and this and there's been a couple times where I've been taken for a ride and my people close to me are like, I tried to tell you. And I'm like, I just never think anyone's lying to me, because it's not something I do, really on a regular basis. I'm just like, it's something I try not to do. I don't think about it.
And that's pretty much the same thing that happened to me. I started because it sounded so fantastic, people with all these military backgrounds that were getting into security, and they had all these great tales to tell, and a lot of them turned out to be not real, or it happened to somebody else, and they just kind of like adopted it for themselves. Took on the story, right? So that has been the worst part, the most difficult part, and I lost a lot of time, a lot of years of my life were lost in trusting the wrong people. Yeah.
Man, that's quite a lesson. I hope that helps other people be a little more wise. Are there any private organizations that you'd like to name that also help with the whole kind of hostage negotiator thing? We can also add links at the bottom of the episode, but
most of the organizations in Mexico that do this kind of work, they like to keep themselves, very private. They don't want to have the word out. There was one case. A few years back, I don't remember the exact year. It was, early 2000, 2005, probably. This guy, there was a very, very famous negotiator. His name was Felix Batista. He used to live in Miami. He was an American citizen, actually. He came down to Mexico, and he was negotiating this very high profile case in it was inland somewhere. I don't remember the exact spot. So after the guy came back, after they released him, he went there. He was having lunch with them. Suddenly he gets a phone call. A few black vans park outside the restaurant where they were eating. He stands up on his own from the table, gets into the van, never to be seen again. And after that, all the negotiators went underground. They disappeared. So there's a lot of them around there, but you got to know them. Usually they work for insurance companies. Insurance companies have a very good way to reach them, but they don't advertise on their own.
The guy stood up, got into vans on his own. On his own. And they never
Who knows what they told him on that phone call, that he actually stood up from the table, walked out, got on the van, drove off, never to be seen again. Wow. And this guy was a guy we all knew. And so, the guys who actually do this right now, they went underground. They disappeared after that. And there's a lot of speculation about what happened. Why did he get up on his own, walk to the van and all that? I think the American embassy got involved even. But there's no story that I could tell you that, it's actually truth. So everything you hear, there's no point.
It's theory.
All we know, exactly. All we know is he got into that van and disappeared.
Wow, that's aggressive. Noted. Okay, insurance companies. Proudest moment you've had in the field?
Proudest moment I had in the field is when I was entering a restaurant in Mexico and somebody got up from a table, walked up to me and said, 10 years ago, you negotiated my release, and he hugged me. That was the proudest moment I've had.
Wow, that's amazing. That's valuable.
There was no way of me recognizing him. I saw a lot of cases, and 10 years later, he still remembered me. So that actually brought a tear to my eye.
Yeah, man, that's amazing. Any advice you'd have for anyone looking to get into this field?
Don't.
Don't. Okay.
I don't know why I even got into this field. I was young, and I thought it was something that would be very nice to tell and tell my kids about.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of great stories, but the amount of pain that you have to see in other people's families. And the first thing that they teach you when you get into this, the old gurus of kidnap and ransom negotiations, the first thing they teach you is you have to stay out of the feeling. You can't get involved emotionally with the family, because the moment you can see the father's heart being ripped out of his chest by the call, and you need to stay cool, because if you start getting emotionally involved, you start making bad decisions, right? So unless you have a heart of stone and you can actually see this kind of suffering, because as we talked the last time we saw each other, there's kidnapping's a lot worse than murder, because murder is final.
Yeah.
It's murdered, and then you get on mourning, and you start to deal with your emotions.
Yeah.
In this case, this person gets murdered every day for the length of the negotiation. And they actually tell them that it's his fault that he's being murdered. And he's always, every day, every time he talks to these people, he's second guessing himself. And actually he's questioning you as a negotiator, right, whether we're making a mistake and would actually get the person killed. And that anguish is really hard to get. If you like this kind of thing, I do advise, go to someone who's really professional. There's nothing very heroic about it. It's a lot of time, locked up in a house with a family that's not your own. They're going through a really, really bad time. So you try to keep, busy, and you're kind of like sequestered with them at the time. So it's not an easy job, and it's not a fun job. But if somebody has a doubt, sure, give me a call and I'll point you in the right direction.
Awesome. Wow. Yeah. So you're just kind of like deep cover with a family that's going through a ridiculous amount of trauma, waiting for a phone call or something.
And you don't leave the house, or you leave the house, as little as possible, because you don't know if the house is under surveillance. So if they see a lot of people coming in and out, they're going to start getting nervous. And the bad guys getting nervous usually means or translates into a victim getting hurt.
More violence. Wow. So you're kind of undercover too.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, you're stuck there.
Yeah.
And then you get a lot of of different things that are going to test your capacity of making decisions on the fly. We had a couple of very, very weird cases. One case, we were really close to getting to reaching a deal with the negotiators, and they tried to squeeze one last bit of information from the victim, and they came back to us saying, "You're lying to me. I just got information that you have a plane, and you didn't tell me." And for us, that was news as well. We didn't know, right? So we said, "Well, what the hell? You have a plane?" And this guy says, "Well, it's not a plane. It's one of those, spraying little planes they use in the fields to fumigate."
Yeah, like a little prop jet kind of thing.
Exactly. And he says, "Well, I needed to know this in advance, because now we have a problem, because they think we're lying." So we have to create a whole new strategy to get out of that one. We had one case where the family asked, it was a little girl that was kidnapped, the same little girl I told you about earlier. And, the proof of life, they said, they asked them, "What color is the ceiling of your room?" And the little girl, in her wide imagination, she didn't like the color of the ceiling in her room. So the answer comes back pink in English, not in Spanish, just pink. And it wasn't. It was painted with the sky and clouds. It was blue and white, right? So we get into a crisis right there, because we say, well, that's not real information. And the kidnapper is actually, it's baffled, saying, "Well, I've asked the little girl and she said pink." She actually said pink. She didn't say rosa, which is the color in Spanish. She said pink. So later on, we found out that she wanted, or she dreamt of having the ceiling of her room painted pink. So she came out with pink. So as I said,
so we paint it pink when we get her back.
So
fine.
So you get to prove, or to test your mind under pressure in a lot of ways. It's a very challenging kind of job, but hopefully one that is not going to be needed for much longer.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So that's been amazing. I got a few more for you as we close here. Closing questions. Favorite quote, favorite mantra, saying?
Favorite quote. There was one time where the CFO of Ford company asked Mr. Henry Ford, what if we train them and then they leave? What if we spend money in training them and then they leave? And then Mr. Henry Ford turned back to him and said, what if we don't and they stay?
Outstanding.
I think that's the best mantra or the best saying ever.
That's
very smart man then. Right?
What if we don't and then they stay? That's a problem.
That's a worse scenario than spending money on them and then they leave.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. Let's see here. How would you like to be remembered, Pablo?
I'd like to be remembered as the man who changed the way we train.
Wow. Okay. How do you mean? Like just?
I'd like to we've been working towards this for a long time. We've tried to bring a lot of science into what we do, and I've been working also closely with law enforcement in some states in the U.S. I wanna bring new techniques into training that would make the most out of the time that you have for training, out of the resources that you have for training, so that you get the best results when it gets real in the job.
Wow, outstanding! That's
and
good.
I want to make that widespread or available to everyone, right? So not an easy task for them.
Yes. Well, I'm glad we're joining forces on doing that. So I'm looking forward to all the stuff
of course,
that we're rolling out, man. That's going to be good. Any habit you'd want to pass to the audience that makes you a better person or better at your job?
Well, not to pat myself on the back, but I think the one habit that has made a difference is I read, and I read a lot.
Yes. Good.
I didn't used to be an avid reader, and now I go through, 16 to 20 books a year, and I would love to go through 50 if I could.
Outstanding. Yes, that's outstanding. That habit is worth more than it's priceless, honestly.
Because then you realize how much there is out there that you don't know, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And you can't outperform the information you have in your head. You just can't. You just can't. So, anyways, that's a really good one. Read, y'all. All right. What are you up to these days and where can we find you?
You can find me on all social media. My company is AS3 Driving, AS3Driving.com. You can go on there. And on my LinkedIn page as P-Monasterio. Mm-hmm. I'm available most of the time.
Outstanding. I'll have all those links in our you'll send me those links later to put into our article. And yes. Wow, brother, thank you so much for this time. This has been a very potent interview with information, good information. So thank you, Pablo, for sharing. It's an honor.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be at Executive Protection Nation.
Yes, sir. 100%. I look forward to everything we're doing. And man, just thank you. We'll talk soon, brother.
We'll talk soon. Thank you, Byron.
Absolutely. Okay. Take care. Out. Boom. Yo, if you're a private security professional wanting to take your game to the next level, go to executiveprotectiontrainingday.com to check out my personal success package for private security professionals. Check it out, executiveprotectiontrainingday.com. And remember, y'all, hard skills do save lives, but soft skills get you paid. Boom. Boom. And to support this podcast, go to executiveprotectionlifestyle.com and contribute to our Patreon account. That Patreon account is what helps me make this podcast possible, contributing to this brand, what we're doing here, making it so that I can bring better guests on, making it so that we can plan more events and just expand the contribution to the private security industry and also to making America a safer place. Do whatever you can, contribute whatever you can, because it makes all of these things possible. Thanks for those contributions. Yo, and before we go, I got a shout out to the sponsors, starting out with Primary Weapon Systems, PWS. They truly are the evolution of the rifle. Use Byron for 10% off. Grayman & Company, the most comfortable tactical suits in the game. Use Byron for 10% off with them. Ballistic Theory. You're going to start seeing a lot of stuff with me in Ballistic Theory because they got good ammo for good prices. Use Byron
for my discount with those guys as well. Last but not least, Executive Protection Institute. Hey, go check them out and get your executive protection education on. Until the next podcast, this is Byron Rodgers, protector by nature and by trade. Out. Boom.